Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So I've been on the iRacing service for over 6 years now, and like many of you, I started seeing a lot of hype pop up around Le Mans Ultimate. On YouTube there are many glowing reviews about the sim, so I finally bought it myself to see what's the fuss about it. And well, I have some thoughts. In this video I'm gonna give you my honest opinion about how LMU compares to iRacing. So let's jump into it. Alright, first off, the force feedback. To me, force feedback is the most important part of a sim. For me, a sim racing title can have bad graphics and also not the best audio, but you have to feel the car through the wheel. And honestly, I think Le Mans Ultimate falls a bit short in this category. Let me explain why. When it comes to feedback through the wheel and precision, iRacing is still hands down the best sim on the market for me. Although a lot of reviews say that LMU has amazing force feedback, nothing comes close to iRacing for me. And as a long-term iRacer, I know my opinion could be biased there a bit, but I really took almost 20 hours to dial in the force feedback for LMU. So trust me when I say I have tried. I also looked up some LMU settings from James Baldwin or other YouTubers to dial in the best settings on my Semicube wheelbase. The biggest struggle for me in LMU was to feel what the front tires are doing on turn-in. Especially when the car started understeering, I had a problem of feeling this in the wheel. Now don't get me wrong, I don't say Le Mans Ultimate is unrealistic or something. I have never driven a real race car and probably never will, but in terms of usable info through the wheel, iRacing just gives me more confidence and more information what the tires are doing at any point in a corner. To really make out the differences of the two sims in the force feedback, I made a comparison. I compared the force feedback of the two sims using the same track and the same car to see what are really the differences when you're turning into a corner. And here the force feedback of Le Mans Ultimate really felt a bit vague to me. I didn't really know when the tires are started to losing grip or if I still had some wiggle room to push even more. In iRacing you instantly feel when the grip of the front tires is giving up and you're just going into understeer. I also had the feeling that you can steer the car in iRacing more with the brake than in LMU, but this can be a difference in the car setup. The same problems I had on corner exit. When you're coming out of a corner and the rear of the car is about to snap, you really have to rely more on watching what the car is doing than feeling it. To be fair, in iRacing that's also a problem with some cars, but in most of the cars I use, I really know how much throttle I can apply out of a slow corner. In Le Mans Ultimate on the other hand, I most of the time saw my car already spinning before I felt something in the wheel. Now visually, LMU really surprised me in a good way. I'm running an old GTX 1080 Ti and I'm racing on a 32:9 monitor, and LMU still runs pretty smooth with most of the settings on high, and that's really impressive in terms of optimization. And that's the same with iRacing for me. It runs also buttery smooth, but I have to admit iRacing looks a bit dated to LMU. Also, the default color grading in LMU looks more realistic to my eye than iRacing. I know there are a bunch of people that use a color grading filter in iRacing to take away the orange film of the sim, but the default color grading of LMU really looks more realistic to my eye from the get-go. The graphics engine of iRacing is pretty old by now, and the developers said that they are updating the graphics engine at some point in the future. In the sound department there's another win for LMU. The engine sounds, and when a car passes you by, it really sounds richer and more impressive than iRacing. Some cars in iRacing really sound a bit plain and a bit boring. Especially when you're racing in a pack, LMU really gives you that visceral feel that you're racing between other race cars. Also the tire warm-up, I think, is more realistic in Le Mans Ultimate. Especially without tire blankets, you really need a few laps till the tires are up to temperature. In iRacing, that is currently not the case with the GT3 cars, but the developers already said that in the next update they will revise the tire model, so you really have to put in more work to get the tires to temperature. In terms of the online racing, I think both sims have a competitive and more mature player base than some of the other sims. But I think the punishment in iRacing for reckless driving is more severe. My honest opinion is that even the rookie drivers in iRacing drive a bit more carefully than in Le Mans Ultimate. In Le Mans Ultimate, I already saw it on countless occasions where drivers just keep crashing into each other in the first corner of a race. And in LMU, to my knowledge, you really cannot submit a protest when you're just on the free subscription of Race Control. In iRacing, everyone can submit a protest if they think they got knocked out by a reckless driver. And this can lead to a ban from the sim for a few days or even for longer times. I have to say, when you're racing closely against other drivers, LMU really has an edge over iRacing there. The netcode feels more stable and you really can do a bit of door banging next to each other in a GT3 car. In iRacing that's almost not possible because as soon as you touch someone more severely, they lose traction and spin off the track. But here's the thing, in iRacing contact usually means consequences. And I think that's a good thing. It teaches newer drivers to respect racing lines, space and safety. The UI in LMU actually feels really clean. It's super easy to find stuff, but you have to keep in mind that the race modes of LMU are still very limited compared to iRacing. I know that the iRacing UI can feel a bit overwhelming when you're starting out. There are so many different settings and buttons to click, it can feel a bit much. But I am maybe not the guy to ask here, because I'm so familiar already with iRacing for a long time, and I really think the new UI is a big step up from the web UI we had in the past in iRacing. The only downside I have with the UI in LMU is that some of the settings are really not in the logical place for me where I would put them. For instance, I'm still having trouble to find the field of view setting in LMU. To be fair, in iRacing you have two UIs. You have the desktop UI where you manage your races, and you have the in-game UI. Here you have the graphic settings, the audio settings, and all the settings that are related to the force feedback or the car. One thing I love about iRacing is the learning curve. You're starting out with slow cars, learning the basics and work your way up. It forces you to build skill and awareness. I know iRacing in the end is a much more expensive sim than LMU, but you also have to consider the amount of content that's in the sim. LMU doesn't really have that structure yet. You kinda just jump in, and for newer drivers that might seem fun at first, but I think you really miss out on learning racecraft in a proper way. And hey, if you're looking for some really great cars in iRacing to start out with, check out my other video on the top 3 sports cars in iRacing. Let's talk about racing in the rain. In iRacing, driving in the rain, it really is brutal. I mean, of course, it depends on the car, but I always have to really put in some extra training laps to not only race in the rain, but also keep the car on the track. And when I say iRacing is brutal in the rain, I mean it in a good way. You really need to stay away from the wet patches and adjust your racing line, otherwise you just slide off the track. In Le Mans Ultimate, racing in the rain feels a bit easier to me. Cars are less twitchy and it's a bit more forgiving when you're not on the perfect wet racing line. The overall immersion in the rain feels good, but to drive in a thunderstorm, it really has not the same intensity than iRacing. Visually, the rain looks good in both sims, but in iRacing they really put in the effort that some parts of the track collect water in a physical correct way. Also in iRacing you have to look out for these wet patches and really alternate your dry racing line to the wet one, otherwise you will be just slower. Also in terms of team racing and endurance racing, iRacing is still the king for me. You can have driver swaps, and you have the different in-game pit radio channels that really can amp up the immersion in a race. I know that LMU is planning to add driver swaps too in future updates, so let's see who will be the king in endurance sim racing. Alright, now the big one, money. iRacing is expensive. I've easily spent 10 times more on iRacing than I did on LMU. But for me, the driving feel and the variety of the different cars and tracks make it worth it. So have I stopped racing in LMU? No, I'm still driving it from time to time, cause for me it's a nice change of pace and the races feel a bit more chill to me than in iRacing. iRacing nowadays is so competitive that you really have to prepare for a race, otherwise you will have no chance to gain any positions or having a good race pace. That is where LMU really shines for me, where I don't have to do as much preparation for a race to have fun. In LMU I really can jump into a car, train a few laps and then having a good online race. As already said, LMU looks and sounds really good. So I can say my main sim is still iRacing, but to switch to LMU for some daily or weekly races at some point feels really nice. Why I made this video is simple. All those YouTube reviews that praise the force feedback of LMU? I just don't think that these reviewers have tried iRacing with a proper setup force feedback. Anyway, that's my honest take, and if you have driven both sims, I would love to hear what you think about this topic. And if you have found this video helpful or interesting, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. See you in the next one.